Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about something wild. How an entire government was brought down in just 72 hours. And the spark? Believe it or not, it was a social media ban. This is a crazy story about digital anger, real-world frustration, and a revolution that was literally organized in a chat room.
So, to really get a feel for the mood on the ground, listen to this quote from a protester, Tanuja Pandali. She said, "This isn't just the death of 19 young people, it's murder." Wow. That's the kind of raw anger we're talking about here. It's what took this from grief to a nationwide call for justice. And really, it's the heart of this entire story.
And that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did a digital ban, basically blocking a few websites, turn into a real-world revolution that brought a whole nation to its knees? What was really going on under the surface to cause this kind of massive explosion?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. To understand the fire, you gotta look at the spark. And that spark was the government's decision to just pull the plug on the country's most popular online platforms. So, on September 4th, 2025, the government banned 26 platforms. We're talking Facebook, X, YouTube, the big ones. Officially, they said it was all about new regulations and a digital service tax. But for millions of young Nepalis, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like a direct attack, like someone was trying to silence them, to shut down the one place they had for news, for their jobs, and crucially, for speaking their minds politically. But here's what's so important to understand. The ban? It wasn't the real problem. Not at all. It was just the match. The country was already a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark, filled with all these issues that have been simmering for years.
So what was in that tinderbox? Well, let's start with this number, 20.8%. That's the youth unemployment rate. Think about that. 1 in 5 young people can't find a job. That's not just a statistic on a chart. That's a whole generation feeling hopeless, like they have no future.
And because there are no jobs at home, you get this other absolutely staggering reality. A full third of the entire country's economy comes from remittances. That's money sent home from Nepalese who had to leave the country just to find work. The economy is literally being held up by its own brain drain.
So you've got this backdrop of struggle, right? And then, on social media, everyone sees this tale of two Nepals. On one side, you have the average person earning maybe $1,400 a year, struggling. And on the other, you have the hashtag #NepoKid trend going viral. Children of the political elite flashing luxury cars, designer clothes, fancy trips. All of a sudden, corruption wasn't some abstract idea anymore. It was personal. It was insulting. And people were watching it all on their phones. So you've got the fuel, you've got the spark. Let's look at the timeline, because the speed at which this whole thing just exploded is just mind-blowing. Okay, look at how fast this happened. September 8th, a peaceful protest turns deadly when police open fire. That was it. That was the point of no return. The very next day, protesters are storming and burning down the Parliament building. The PM's house is on fire. He resigns and flees the country. By September 10th, the army's on the street. In just 3 days, it went from a protest to the complete and total collapse of the government. But here's where the story takes a wild 21st century turn. What happened next is maybe the most incredible part. With the government gone, the protesters used the very tools the government tried to ban to build a brand new one, from scratch.
I mean, think about this. They created a server on Discord, the gaming chat app, and called it the Nepal Parliament. Over 145,000 people joined. In this chat room, they debated who should lead the country. They organized, they held an online vote. They literally elected an interim prime minister in a chat room and then went to the army and said, "Here's our new leader."
And who did they choose? A very well-respected figure, Sushila Karki. She was the country's first female chief justice, and she has this reputation for being tough on corruption. And incredibly, she accepted. She said she felt she had to because of the voices from the street.
Okay, so a revolution like this, it never happens in a vacuum, right? There's always a bigger picture. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the geopolitical chessboard, because there are some major global players with a huge stake in what happens in Nepal.
Nepal is basically caught in this tug-of-war between giants. You've got the United States pouring in $500 million for infrastructure with its Millennium Challenge Corporation. Then you have China making massive investments as part of its huge Belt and Road Initiative. And of course, there's India, the traditional powerhouse next door, trying to hold on to its deep historical and economic ties.
And our source material also points to funding from external groups. For example, the U.S. National Endowment for Democracy, an American nonprofit. In 2024 alone, it provided over $1 million to different groups in Nepal. And when you look at what that money was for, it was for things like strengthening youth civic engagement, funding investigative journalism to root out corruption, and even specifically to research China's influence.
So let's just step back and process this. A government born from a chat room, organized by Gen Z on Discord. The big question we're left with is, what does this mean? Is this some kind of new model for democracy, a revolutionary blueprint for the digital age, or is it just a recipe for chaos, a fragile system born out of anger that's doomed to fail? That is the massive question that Nepal, and really the whole world, is now trying to figure out.